In this lesson, we're going to be talking about labels. Labels are a system that's designed to easily place logos or symbols on top of 3D models, all interactively. So to assign a label, you can double-click on the material, and that pulls up the material properties. From there, you'll want to go to the Labels tab, and that presents you with the Labels interface. So I'll double-click on the label box, and we can select a label to load. So I'll select this KS3 outline.png, and the next thing you need to do is tell KeyShot how to position that label. So if you click on the Position tab, you can interactively place this anywhere you want. And once you're happy with your positioning, you can press Done. Now, if you want to change the mapping type, you can click on the type and choose from any of the other types: box, spherical, cylindrical, UV coordinates. And if you're not sure what the mapping types are, you might want to check out the tutorial on texturing. The first part of that covers all the mapping types. You can also read about those in the online manual. If you select texturing from the left and go to texture mapping, all the mapping types are explained. Now, labels do have a different mapping type that's not available with textures, and that's normal projection. What this does is this will project the label from the direction of the surface normal. And what that allows you to do is place labels on top of curved or irregular surfaces, and it reduces the problem with stretching. So notice here, if we click and position this down, and let's reduce our scale a little bit, you can see that the label does wrap around this curved surface really nicely. And that's because of this normal projection mode. Now, if you want to scale your label, you can do so by using the scale slider. Let's go ahead and position this back up. And you can also shift the position of the label by using the sliders. You can control the angle of the label. That will rotate it for you. You can flip it horizontally. You can choose to repeat the label. You can flip it vertically. And we have some additional parameters down here. You can adjust the intensity of the label. You can think of this as a brightness slider. So if the lighting on your model looks really good, but the label looks too dark or too bright, you can always adjust this intensity slider to control that. We also have a depth slider, and what that's going to do is when you have a material like this, so we have our glass, and there's essentially two sides to this material. You have the front side and the back side. This depth parameter will allow you to project the label onto the back as well. So you see when we reach a certain value here, that label also is projected on the other side. Okay. You have IOR. I will explain that here in just a second, but also I want to show you two-sided. So when two-sided is checked, the label will be visible on both sides. So it's more for transparent objects. So notice when two-sided is not checked, it's only projected on one side. So the label is there, but we're on the back side, it's not visible. So if you're running into that issue, you'll want to make sure that two-sided is checked. We'll go ahead and reduce the depth though, because I'd like the label to only be on the front. And let's go ahead and introduce some specular. So as I increase the specular, that's going to allow reflectivity and specular highlights to be shown on the label. Let's go ahead and switch out our lighting environment so we can take a look here at what that's actually doing. Okay, so we have our sharp specular highlight there. Now notice when the specular color is black, that highlight is reflecting on the material but not the label. So if you do want these types of highlights to impact your labels, you want to turn up the specular color. Okay, there's one other thing I want to show you about labels, And notice here that although I'm using an image which does have a square aspect ratio, we're not seeing the rectangular borders of that image. That's because I'm using a PNG with transparency. This is going to be very important because I'm sure a lot of you will be wanting to position logos onto models, and you're not going to want that square rectangular border on your label. Let me show you what I mean. I'll go ahead and add another label, clicking Add. And by the way, you can have an unlimited number of labels. So I'll select KS3 outline.jpg. It looks the same, but it's actually quite different. If I click on Position, notice this one we do see that rectangular frame on the image. That's because a JPG file does not support transparency. Also notice when I click and position this, it's positioned on top of the other label. If I want to control the order of that, I can select the label in the layers list and shift it up or down. Okay, so let's look at why this one's transparent and this one is not. So if we open up Photoshop, let me go ahead and show you what the difference here is. So this is the normal JPEG, which just does not support transparency. And if you have the logo against a transparent background in Photoshop, and that's indicated by this checker pattern, this indicates that there is no rectangular border. So if you save this out as a PNG file, you're not going to have that rectangular frame. So that's just a little tip there for you. If you choose to delete labels, you can just select the label in the list, press delete, and that will go away. Alright, so that's a look at the labeling system.